When you talked to Rocco Baldelli about Sonny Gray, what did you learn that maybe you didn't know before about Gray, either the pitcher, the person, or both?
I think just sort of the approach that he goes into every day with. And I think we'll probably see, or I assume we'll see it as we get into the season, and we actually get to spend time around him. But I thought Rocco would have some pretty good insight, and I've talked to him before. When I was in Kansas City, that was obviously one of the teams in the AL Central that you see often. So I know he's pretty good about giving insight about his guys. So, but just the idea of how he approaches things, whether that's just like the game day, and actually I talked to some folks in the winter meetings who had covered him before. And they say game day, he's like, one of those guys who's like in his own little world. And it's not even like, don't talk to him. It's almost like you're not even there. he's
Right.
that locked into what he's doing, whether it's visualization or just sort of like, going through things in his mind. But I think we got a little sense of that at that introductory press conference when Sonny was talking. But I think hearing it from other people and, just sort of getting a little bit of somebody else's take on, what they saw and how they saw that trickle down to the rest of the clubhouse, whether that's the pitching staff or just, his teammates. I think that was the thing that I took from it, is just like, okay, Cardinals talked about him obviously being an innings eater, but also a guy who's going to be, lead guy on that staff, at least for the next couple of years. How did that translate to the other pitchers on the staff in Minnesota? And that was the big thing that I wondered about and asked Rocco about.
I really love the signing, because I think Sonny Gray's really, really good. And I know that there were some concerns expressed by observers about, is he really a big innings guy? I think he pitches enough of innings. I mean, I know that one recent season he was down a little bit, but it wasn't anything drastic. I almost get the idea, and I could be wrong, but for someone that had the wins above replacement he did, and the ERA he did, and the FIP he did, and the second place finish in the Cy Young, it sounds kind of nuts in a way, but my sense is that maybe he's not. Maybe people, some people, maybe too many people don't realize or don't think this was as big a deal as it actually was. I mean, do you get any sense of that, or is that just me reading too many things online?
I mean, I think there's definitely, a portion of the Cardinals fan base that was like, oh, they want the name guys, whether that's Snell or, the people that they, top of the free agent list, Nola, those types of things. And then once you got past that, it was sort of like, they didn't get the guy, or Yamamoto, whoever you want to put in that category. Once you get past that, well, they didn't get the guy. But I think for the Cardinals, at least, especially coming off of last year, where you just had, particularly early on, some guys throughout the season, you had a lot of starts that just were non-competitive starts out of your rotation. To be able to plug in a guy like that for the most part, consistently, you're going to get those competitive starts. You're going to get quality starts. You're going to get a guy who keeps you in the game for the most part. I think it was important because you saw how much it affected the team to not have that for large chunks of last season. So to be able to go out and get a guy and say, okay, you plug him in, that's a guy that's going to be able to give you what were sort of missing for large chunks of last season in your rotation. I think that was important. I mean, and I know when they made those 3 starting pitching signings early, one of the conversations I had with different people, like, fans, or whether it's just, people interested in Cardinals, and they're like, oh, well, but, whether that's enough or they want to do more. The thing that I always came back to was like, well, by getting those 3 in place, I felt like it put them in a better position if they're going to do something else. Like if you go into the off season like they did, talking about you need pitching, you got 3 spots in the rotation that are just empty. And then you're going out there trying to make deals, whether it's negotiation with, agent or with another team about a trade. If you got those holes there and you're trying to negotiate, your leverage is 0. When you fill the spot with 3 guys that you feel like you can go forward with, and then you go out there looking to maybe get better, you're coming off from a very different standpoint. It's like, okay, you can walk away from the table at any point. You don't have to maybe get leverage and to give it up something you don't want to give, but you can still look to make the team better. I mean, that remains to be seen if they're going to do anything else or if it's something that goes into the trade deadline. But I felt like just the fact that they were able to secure the guys they did put them in a much better position in multiple ways.
Yeah, and it's I know that Ben Frederickson's written about this. I know Derek has talked about it on his chats a lot and in stories, and you guys have been all over it. That they probably do need one more starting pitcher, and I'm going to go back to what I said about Sonny Gray. As much as I like him, but if you want to look at a couple things where you say, well, it's great that he started 32 games last year, and he's a really, really good pitcher. But, in 21 and 22, he averaged like 25 starts. Now, 25 starts is fine, but usually what you want is a guy that can give you 30. So maybe he will miss a few starts here and there. I'm not sure. But let's just say for purpose of conversation, he does miss a few. Maybe he makes 26, 27 starts instead of 32. Then you have Steven Matz. His 2 years as a Cardinal, he's averaged 13 and a half starts. And I could go on, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's just I don't know what's behind the 5 that at least they've penciled in to be their rotation in 2024. It does. If you want reasons to be a little nervous about their depth as starting pitchers, I think that's a legitimate concern. I don't know. Would they really turn a starting job over to Zach Thompson or Libator? What is your read on the situation? I'll shut up now.
I think that at least at this point, those guys are the depths, and those are probably the most. I mean, those are the more experienced depths right now. Because you look at a guy, whether it's a Roby or a Rom or just some of the top guys in the farm system. Most of them, aside from Thompson, Libator, and Rom, you haven't really gotten starts in the big leagues. And even Rom, it was just at the end of last season. So those two, Libator and Thompson, I think are sort of the guys who are on deck at this point. If something happened early in the season and one of the other guys was not, one of the 5 that you pencil in wasn't able to make starts, would they have to turn to one of them? I think at this point, yeah, they'd have to probably turn to one of those, the 2 young lefties to fill the rotation. And then, that becomes the point of like, all right, well, what are you going to get from those guys? Because, we've seen flashes here and there. We've seen ups and downs from both of them. We've seen things that maybe are encouraging, but you've never seen either one of them do it over a sustained period of time at the big league level and have success. You haven't seen that. So then it becomes a little iffy. I mean, there's no other way to say that. I mean, that's but I think right now at this point, if something happens, you'd slot one of them in, but I don't think you're penciling one of them in to begin the season. Right now, the 5, and that includes Matz, who I know some people seem to want to, ship off or move one way or another. He's one of your 5 right now.
Lynn Worthy is with us from the Post-Dispatch, STL Today. You can follow him on X or Twitter at LWorthy Sports, at LWorthy, as in James, at LWorthy Sports. What's your read on the bullpen situation? I know Mo has said that he obviously they want to get some help for their bullpen, some impact help. You have any inkling about where they're going to look, or the kind of the profile, the kind of reliever they're going to pursue? 1 or 2 relievers, whatever it may be.
It seems like it's going to be a guy, not a designated closer, but a guy who you can pitch in high leverage, where on a given night, if he had the best matchup, or depending on who's down, if you need him to close the game, he could do that. If you need him to pitch, to sort of bridge you to the closer, he could do that. You bring him into a tight spot. So I think it's going to be that type of guy, not a designated closer, but a guy who you sort of put in there with that group of Helsley, Gallegos, Romero, and you say, okay, you have multiple options on the back end on a given night. So I think that's what they're hoping to add. And I think they feel like ideally, you need to have, like they feel pretty good about Helsley Gallegos, even though last year was a bumpy, and they think that they realized some things with him that they were trying to fix during the season and really couldn't. Then also Romero looked good and then finished the season hurt. But so I think they feel like if they have, those three, another guy that's a back end option, that they'd feel pretty strong about that. And they feel like overall their bullpen would hopefully benefit from, more competitive starts out of their starters and not getting so deep into the bullpen early on and throughout the season. But I think it's going to be not a closer, but a guy who can pitch at the back end and maybe close at times when needed.
Yeah, and you're right about that. I'm gonna, I love to look up stuff, and I'm gonna tomorrow morning, I think, just gonna go through all the free agent relievers that are still out there. But I'm going to look them all up in terms of like their performance and high leverage. I know that I do know, because I just took a quick glance a few days ago. I mean, I know that Hector Neris, that pitcher in Houston, was a tremendous high leverage guy last year. So he would fit the bill that you're talking about. So it's going to be interesting to see what he comes up with. I'm talking about Mo and Gersh. We'll see what they come up with. But I think it's got to be, like you said, it's got to be an impact guy. Not just a guy, but an impact guy. What are your thoughts? I know this subject has come up, and I was talking about earlier, the idea of the Cardinals getting something done ahead of time with Paul Goldschmidt as he goes into his free agent year. Is there any reason to be concerned about that because of his age? Or is in your opinion, is a 1 or 2 year deal okay?
I mean, to me, I wouldn't be. I mean, I guess if I was in that position, I would think that you could almost see how things look before you have to dive right in. I'm not sure that that's the approach they'll take. I mean, I think coming off of 2 years ago, you probably would have said, okay, sign him up, lock him in for another couple of years, don't let him get to that point. Last year, obviously, the results weren't quite the same, so. Maybe you give it a little time to see what it looks like, and I don't know if that means that once you get into the season, you wouldn't necessarily go down that road. I mean, I'm not sure. Like I couldn't really tell you with him. I mean, I know last year when we talked to a guy like Montgomery, they hadn't really gotten down that road. Before you got to the start of the season. At that point, he said, "Yeah, well, we could still talk," but it seemed like that ship had kind of sailed. It hadn't completely sailed, but it had kind of sailed. So, like, once you got to past a certain point, he was going to go to free agency. I don't know if Goldschmidt necessarily going to have that hard of a line with that, but I think there's probably reason to question a little bit, or to maybe want to get a little more, as much data as you can before you put a couple more years down for him. But there also might be that aspect of, he's a guy that they might want to keep it and make sure that he finishes as a Cardinal. I don't know if that's how they're thinking or not, but sometimes that factors in, whether it's that's a guy that they want to make sure stays a Cardinal, and so they don't want to mess around with him getting to free agency. So I'm not sure what the dynamics are, but it could potentially be a couple things in play there.
Lynn, I appreciate it, man, and wish you happy holidays. We're certainly within that zone now. Less than 2 weeks to Christmas, and I hope you get a little downtime and go, spend time with your family, your friends, loved ones, all that. But I'm just wishing you the best at this time of year. And thanks for helping us out from time to time here on the show. I don't take it for granted. I appreciate it very much, and all the good work you do at the Post-Dispatch.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. Happy holidays to you, too. I hope all is good with you and your family and everybody associated with the show.
All right. Well, and we'll keep reading. Thank you. That's Lynn Worthy. Does a good job. Really good dude, too. Who a guy, Jim Hewer, just going to dovetail on something we're talking about?
Sure.
A guy that's creating a lot of buzz, as he should, because last year, he sort of moved into a hold on, let me just call this up. How many times do I say that? You got to be sick and tired of hearing me say. Anyway, he kind of went. You know who I compare him to? I'm going to tell you who I compare him to until I actually tell you who I'm talking about.
All right.
can't compare him to Adam Ottavino, who was who the Cardinals drafted him and all that, and he was a starting pitcher, wasn't real good. He was okay. Got moved to the bullpen just because his teams through the years didn't know what to do with him exactly. But he found his niche as a high leverage reliever, and he's been great in that role for a long time. And even though he's up there in age, Adam Ottavino is still good as a high leverage reliever. But this is a guy that, sort of mid-career, and I may be a little off on the timing, but he was well into his career as a starting pitcher, and then he was repurposed and became a full-time bullpen guy, and then eventually jumped into a high leverage role and was fantastic, and people are still signing him and paying him for that. The guy I'm talking about was once a Cincinnati Reds rather heralded prospect, but he never cut it as a starter. He was moved to the bullpen, and once the Tampa Bay Rays got a hold of him last year, because they're smarter than anybody when it comes to pitching, they turned Robert Stevenson into a monster last season.
Oh, yes. And
again, not a good starting pitcher at all, even though he was like the Reds' top pitching prospect for quite a while. If you look at he only made like 22 starts in his career before he got on that relief track, and he wasn't really good at that. But whatever it is, they got down there in their pitching lab, and the people that they've hired, the Cardinals need to find out the secrets to their success, because Robert Stevenson last year, he was traded there by the Pirates. The Pirates obviously didn't know what they had. And if you look at what he did when he became a Tampa Bay Ray, he struck out in 38 innings. He struck out 43% of the batters he faced. Is that good?
That's welcomed in every bullpen.
Is that good?
It is outstanding.
And he's a free agent. And last year in high leverage situations, now we're talking a pretty small sample, but it's still a sample. When in high leverage situations last year, I mean, he struck out 42%, and they hit like 130 off of him.
Wow.
Yeah. 6'3", 205. He's only 30 years old. Well, he'll be 31 in February the 24th. But there's a lot of teams trying to, or in the process of making offers to him. I would have to think the Cardinals are one of them.
I would hope so. I mean, a guy like that's number one. That's what you want. Hey, this guy can strike guys out. Thank you. We'll take him. We're desperate for that here in St. Louis.
Hector Neris, the Houston Astros, the big fella, real big fella, right?
Oh yes.
He was awfully good doing the same thing in high leverage last year. If you look at his strikeout rate, big time strikeout rate, and they didn't get much off of him last season. When he was used in that role by the Astros. So he's another one who's a free agent. But I'm going to scour the list and see what I come up with. There are guys out there that fit that description of a proven high leverage reliever,
Yeah, it is. And, Neris was a guy who, when he was in Philly, he was like a yo-yo. He was really good one year. Then he was bad. Then he was good. Then he was bad. They finally moved on. And like you said, man, his year this past season was really good with Houston. And going back to the Tampa reference, somebody described this, and I forgot who it was, but this kind of puts in perspective what they're doing down there. They said they just take a guy. They figure out which guy they want. They figure out what he does really well, and they just tell him, do that. Because there's so many people they're trying to, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you need to work this in there. They said they find a guy, and if it's a sweeper, if it's a curve, it's a splitter, whatever it is, they just tell him, just work on that. Use that. Don't worry about all the other crap that's not working for you. And the reality is they find more guys that way, and they are all ultra successful in short stints down there. And they've made an entire, pitching staff around some of that sometimes. So it's really interesting what they can do as opposed to what the rest of Major League Baseball is doing. And there's another success story, like you just said, in Stevenson.
Yeah, he's really it's kind of found himself, and I think that's needless to say that's important. So I'm going to look at the list to probably have more guys to discuss tomorrow, but the Cardinals need to get hopping. You know who's still now the only thing with him is I'm talking about Aroldis Chapman. The only thing with him is he walked way too many guys. But as far as high leverage strikeout stuff, he's still about as good as there is. He's crazy as far as what he's able to do in that kind of role. Let me look him up real quick. And I don't know what he's seeking or anything like that. But this is an example of like the Chapman experience. It's a roller coaster. This is actually kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. So
last year, high leverage situations, he faced 88 batters. Strikeout rate 37.5%, which is phenomenal. You know what his walk rate was though? Almost 22%.
Yeah, it's a bit high.
Yeah, it is. That's a bit high, but and he even made Bruce Bochy nervous, I think, once he got over to Texas in that trade.
He did.
Yeah, so I don't know about him. He's compelling, but I still don't know about him. I'll leave it at that because that's just that's too many walks, man.
It is, but this isn't the Cardinals. Well, you wouldn't think this is the Cardinals' view, but like the Royals, somebody's going to take him and go, you know what? If he's good for us, I can turn him around if I'm not in the race and go get something for him. Yeah, because if he is still good and you're out, you can use him. You sign him to a 1-year deal if you can make that work, and you can turn him into something later on because that's what the Royals did with him.
So we'll see what the Cardinals can come up with. That's certainly a big test, and I do think. This is not a new opinion for me or a revised opinion at all. I've been saying it all along. I like the starters that they sign, but they still need another dude. I'm expecting really good things from Sonny Gray. But Sonny Gray also might be a guy that gives you, for little minor this, little minor that, gives you like 26, 27 starts instead of 30, 32. So you need someone to take those starts if that happens. You have Matz. When you have a guy you've been paying him for 2 years and he's averaged 13.5 starts per season. And then Sonny Gray, who's a little older. But, again, if he misses time, it's not going to be a lot, but still. 21 and 22, he made He made like 51 starts over those 2 seasons. So that's 2 guys right there that could be down a little bit. More so Matz with his injury history. And I'm sorry, man. You got to have more of a backup plan than Zach Thompson and Matthew Libator.
Yes.
If you're a, quote, championship contender, which you absolutely are not, you got to have more backup, more quality depth in that rotation. Now, maybe, in a perfect world, that's the thing. Everything's got to break the right way. You got to be an unexpected surprise, all that kind of stuff. Maybe Gordon Graceffo gets back after having a couple of injuries last year, and he's fine now, but maybe he gets back to being that hot, fast-tracking pitching prospect. Mm-hmm. Maybe Tekoa Roby becomes that guy, and he's legit. Maybe there's a couple other guys that, get on a rocket and make their way to St. Louis. I think it's too early yet, but like Ian Bedell would be one of those guys. I mean, maybe there'll be some pleasant surprise-type developments for them. But you can't bank on that stuff. That's the problem. You can't count on that stuff. Now, the other thing is if you're short a starting pitcher or 2, well, in 2021 and 2022, John Mozeliak and his cabinet, they each season they acquired 2 starting pitchers at the deadline 2 years in a row, and it really worked out very, very well. So maybe they're thinking that's when they would make their move. I don't know. I can only go by their track record, and I can only go by what I think is like you can't always trust them on these things because, once again, let me say it again, they have a really bad habit of overrating and overestimating what they have. You know?
You always do. Always do.
Let's take a timeout, but we're here on the Ambassador Midwest 4 o'clock hour, but I want to make sure I get this in because I love talking about this. You know what Mrs. Bernie did today, Jim Hewer?
What's that?
She sent me a photo because she was out and about, but she was shopping for a specific reason, and I know everyone's interested in her. So she took a photo, and I see it looks like children's clothes, brand new. I see a bunch of toys.
Yeah.
I see bananas, but I think they're for me actually. She put them on a kitchen counter when she came in.
There you go.
I'm like, well, what are those bananas? Hey, man, I'm the gorilla. They're my bananas. But no, she picked up some clothes and some new toys. And why would she do that? Well,
I know why.
You do know why.
Yes, sir.
Because we're going to be at Friendly's a week from tomorrow. It'll be December the 20th. Wednesday, December 20th, and at Friendly Sports Bar and Grill in South County at Bayless and 55. It's going to have a Christmas party from 12 to 6, a Christmas party and a food drive for Feed My People, a wonderful organization. And by the way, she's also going to be picking up some non-perishable food items. That's her next shopping expedition. She went with the clothes and toys today. So get in the spirit set by Mrs. Bernie because she's already out there, gathering stuff to take down to Friendly Sports Bar and Grill